On the dark, silent night of December 16, 1773, history was about to be made. The moonlight cast shadows across the Boston harbor as a group of men disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded 3 British ships. The ships carried well over 340 crates of British East India tea and were ready to unload their cargo. But these resilient men were not going to allow that. They broke open chests filled with tea and began tossing them overboard. One by one, the ships that carried tea worth around $1 million were made empty. That night's event soon became known as the Boston Tea Party, carried out by the Sons of Liberty. It was a bold and extraordinary act that challenged the British government's unjust taxation policies and the denial of the colonists' right to representation in the Parliament. This act was not about dumping tea for a protest, rather it was a fight for the rights and responsibilities that would eventually lead to the birth of the United States. The Boston Tea Party, carried out by the Sons of Liberty on December 16, 1773, was crucial to rights and responsibilities because about 40% of the colonists wanted to have their right to representation in important decisions. The Parliament consistently placed taxes on common items, denying their responsibility to respect their citizens' rights, motivating the Sons of Liberty to fight for the rights of representation, leading them to dump over 342 crates of tea from British ships, while disguised as Mohawk Indians, eventually leading to the American Revolution. In the years previous to 1773, Britain had consistently placed taxes on everyday items in American colonies without granting them representation in their parliament. The most famous of these taxes were the Stamp Act of 1765 and the Townshend Acts of 1767. Both of these taxed common goods such as paper, glass, and tea. The British believed they were doing the right thing to tax the colonies. After all, the taxes were a way to cover the cost of protecting the colonies during the French and Indian War. However, the colonies felt that the taxes to be unfair to them. It wasn't about the money to the colonists, it was about their rights. The phrase "no taxation without representation," made by Patrick Henry, became a rallying cry throughout the colonies. The colonists believed they had the constitutional right as Englishmen not to be taxed without their consent. They also argued that the British government had a responsibility to grant them representation in decisions that would impact them. The colonists' frustrations fueled the need for protests, boycotts, and the desire for political participation. In 1773, the British introduced the Tea Act, a new law that gave the British East India Company the exclusive right to sell their tea to the colonies. Although the Tea Act did reduce the price of tea, it also gave the British East India Company control over the tea imports. This effectively closed out many of the local tea merchants. This act was seen as an attack on the economic rights of the colonists. Not only that, but the Tea Act also imposed a new tax on tea, which further irritated and angered the colonists, who already felt that they were being unfairly taxed. This wasn't just an economic problem, rather it is also a violation of their rights as English citizens. The colonies believed that only their local governments should have the ability to tax them, not the faraway English Parliament. This belief would be one of the main forces behind the Boston Tea Party. On the night of December 16, 1773, the Sons of Liberty, a group of patriots who had been boycotting and protesting against British taxes, carried out the protest that would come to be known as the Boston Tea Party. Samuel Adams, one of the event's leaders, had been organizing boycotts and demonstrations against the Tea Act for quite a while now, but now it was time to take direct action. The Sons of Liberty dressed up as Mohawk Indians to conceal their identities. Then they boarded 3 ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, and then began throwing the tea overboard. They dumped 342 crates of tea that night, which should be worth around $1 million today. By destroying the tea, the colonists conveyed that they would not accept being taxed without their consent. They were not protesting the Tea Act, but rather they were also asserting their right to have control over their own economic and political future. In response to the Boston Tea Party, the British government decided to implement the Coercive Act, also known as the Intolerable Acts, in 1774. These laws were applied to punish Massachusetts and reassert British authority over the colonies. The Boston Port Act closed the port of Boston until the colonists paid for the destroyed tea. The Quartering Act required that the colonists must house and feed British soldiers. The Massachusetts Government Act replaced the elective local government with an appointive one and increased the powers of the military governor, and an Administration of Justice Act allowed British officials charged with capital offences to be tried in England. This further angered the colonists, who now saw these actions as a clear violation of their rights. First, they were denied of their rightful representation in Parliament, and now they were being punished for defending their freedoms. The coercive acts united the colonies into a group of patriots who realized that it was their responsibility to stand up for their rights, no matter the cost. The Boston Tea Party was not just a regular protest. It was the spark that ignited the desire for revolution. Soon after coercive acts were passed, the colonies met at the First Continental Congress in 1774. There, they decided how they should take their next steps towards independence. The right to self-govern and the responsibility to defend their freedom became central colonial causes. The Boston Tea Party showed Britain that the colonies were willing to fight for their rights and take on the responsibility of defending their freedom. This act of rebellion united many of the colonies and set the stage for the American Revolution, which would lead to the founding of a nation that followed the principles of liberty, equality, and self-government. Carried out by the Sons of Liberty on December 16, 1773, it was crucial to their rights and responsibilities because the colonists wanted their constitutional right to their representation and were ready to fight for it. The Parliament placed many taxes on everyday items, which motivated groups like the Sons of Liberty to fight for representation. This led them to dump $1 million worth of tea into the Boston Harbor. The Boston Tea Party was one of the most important moments in American history. It was one of the main causes causing the American Revolution. If the event had never occurred, then America would most likely have stayed under British control. The Boston Tea Party wasn't about defying one tax. It was about declaring their will to fight for their rights to representation and self-government, and the responsibility to protect those rights for future generations. This act of defiance is what united the colonies against Britain and was one of the main causes leading to our independence.